Hi, this is Paul, and this is Rough Draft for Sunday, where I go through the status of my sermon today. It'll change somewhat by Sunday, probably, but here we go. I'm working through the post-exilic prophets. There's a piece from Mother Jones that I read today. It's The End of the World as They Know It, the distinct burden of being a climate scientist. These are climate scientists dealing with the work that they do in seeing the destruction of the climate and believing that we are pushing the world past over a cliff, and they recognize that there's no political means to stop this in time. One person, Kim Cobb, tells her story this way. In a row house made of cinder blocks on the tiny island in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, she monitored the American election results using a satellite uplink that took several minutes to load a page. When she saw Donald Trump's victory, she felt shock and soon descended into severe depression. I had the firm belief that Washington would act on climate change and would be acting soon, the 44-year-old Cobb said. When Trump was elected, it came crashing down. Back home in Atlanta, Cobb entered what she now calls an acute mental health crisis. Most mornings she could not get out of bed despite having 4 children to tend to. She would sob spontaneously. She obsessed about the notion that the U.S. government would take no action to address climate change and to confront its consequences. I could not see a way forward, she recalled. My most resounding thought was, how could my country do this? I had to face the fact that there was a veritable tidal wave of people who don't care about climate change and who put personal interest above the body of scientific information that I had contributed to. Her depression persisted for weeks. I didn't recognize myself, she said. She lives within a story, and that story regulates her mood. We have powerful forces in our country to create these stories and to mold these stories and to shape these stories. These stories are in fact so powerful they grab all of media's attention. If we look at the dates up, you can hardly look at national news, and every day until the 2020 election and beyond it, this will be one of the top stories in the news. In February 2020, you'll have the Iowa caucus, you'll have the New Hampshire primaries. March 2020, here in California, we get to take part in Super Tuesday. This is the story of the world that we inhabit, perhaps. Or maybe you're inhabiting your little local story. And consciousness is a very funny thing. It's a little timeless cloud that we call consciousness, and it dominates what we feel to be reality. It could be a big thing like presidential elections or climate change, but the frame can be large or it can be small. It can be strife in a personal relationship. It could be credit card debt. It could be an illness that you have. It could be the suffering of a particular interest group, and this dominates your world. It could make you happy or it can make you miserable. And we live in a succession of these moments. And our imagination of the future then tends to dominate our present. Will the strife always continue? Will either your victory or your political defeat dominate? Will the climate take us out? This dominates us. And in the case of these climate scientists, this is the world that they inhabit. And this woman, Kim Cobb, had difficulty taking care of her 4 children. This raises the question, who do we listen to? Because these issues are not new. These issues are ancient. And we've been looking at the post-exilic prophets where some of those who are taken out into exile are brought back to are come back to Jerusalem, and they're going to rebuild the temple. They've got the prophecies of Jeremiah in their mind, 70 years, and well, everything will be great again, and the new Jerusalem will come up, and the nations will come to Jerusalem's light. Or maybe it'll just be a muddling, middle of the road, constant strife, trying to rebuild a temple that isn't anywhere near as good as the old one, and constantly fighting with the people around them who maybe had some ancestral claim on this land, or maybe were people that the Assyrians moved in, and in the absence of the exiles sort of taken over, and on and on, and muddle, and the Persians are replaced by the Greeks, and the Greeks are replaced by the Romans, and on and on and on and on. So what is real? What is consciousness? What is true? How can we feel about the future? Who do we listen to? Now, of course, we have science, and we have all this scientific polling, and already we're polling Trump versus Biden, and Harris versus Trump, and Sanders versus Trump, and Warren versus Trump. But October 21, 2016, 538 said Hillary had a 86.6% chance of winning, and Donald Trump only 13.3. The exiles, for them, this was life and death, and it was a roller coaster. And the Bible Project people talk about this book as Zechariah is a wild ride. It's got all this startling imagery, and in these last few chapters, 9 to 14, we talked about 1 through 8 last week. You have this messianic figure riding into Jerusalem on a donkey, but also being rejected by the other shepherds, and these fantastic images going back and forth. And so here they are. They have all the same issues we have. You have the big picture. Will God finally restore the fortunes of his promised of his chosen people? Or will they just continue to muddle, and will their consciousness, will their cloud of consciousness simply be dominated by the spat that you're having with your spouse, or the problems of your child, or the disagreement with your neighbors, or whether weather is going to go well for you so that your crops will grow and your animals will flourish, or if it'll be another bad year and maybe you won't be able to make it to harvest time another year around, or maybe the enemies will come and take your land. And this is human life. This is how we live. There are these New Testament validations that we see in these prophecies. Matthew 21 and John 12. You have the prophet Zechariah quoted when Jesus comes into Jerusalem. This took place to fulfill what was spoken through the prophet. Say to daughter Zion, see, your king comes to you, gentle and riding on a donkey, on a colt, the foal of the donkey. The disciples went and did as Jesus had instructed them. And Hosanna, son of David. That certainly didn't turn out the way the disciples would have imagined. But if you go back to chapter 9, you find that, well, it's quite a complicated chapter. The first part of the chapter has all sorts of regional geopolitical drama with Tyre and Sidon and the Persians, and Hamath in Syria, where they're reigning from, and Gaza and Ashkelon, and the mongrel people will occupy Ashdod, and I will put an end to the pride of the Philistines. I will take the blood from their mouths, the forbidden food from between their teeth. Those who are left will belong to our God and become a clan in Judah. And then you have the famous part that Matthew and John quote. I will take away the chariots from Ephraim and the war horses of Jerusalem. The battle bow will be broken. He will proclaim peace to the nations. His rule will extend from sea to sea. And whereas Matthew and John quote that certainly didn't seem to happen, especially in the light of Good Friday. Return to your fortress, you prisoners of hope. Even now I announce I will restore twice as much to you. I will bend Judah as I bend my bow, and fit it with Ephraim. I will rouse you, Zion, against your sons, Greece, and make you like a warrior's sword. And then the rest of the chapter. Then the Lord will appear over them. His arrows will flash like lightning. The sovereign Lord will sound the trumpet, and he will march in the storms of the south. And the Lord Almighty will shield them. They will destroy and overcome with slingshots. They will drink and roar as with wine. They will be full like a bowl used for sprinkling the corners of the altar. The Lord their God will save his people on that day, as a shepherd saves his flock. They will sparkle in his land like jewels in a crown. How attractive and beautiful they will be. Grain will make the young men thrive, and new wine the young women. And certainly on that Palm Sunday, they were imagining such a thing, only to have Thursday and Friday come upon them and Jesus arrested and the Lord didn't flash in the sky. In fact, the sky turned dark. And Jesus cries from the cross, my God, why have you forsaken me? What are you to do with these prophecies? They're like dreams. They flash in and out. You can't tell the time. That they're certainly not like the kind of prognostication we want from our prognosticators, whether they be climate or political or social or any kind across the spectrum. But isn't this always the case? Please tell me when you were safe and the world was under your control. Was it in the 30s and 40s with Stalin and Hitler and Mao? Was it in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s during the Cold War? Oh, maybe the 90s and aughts felt dandy. C.S. Lewis in 1948, once the Russians exploded their bomb and the Western world was panicking, wrote a piece called Living in an Atomic Age. What the wars and the weather? Are we in for another one of those periodic ice ages? And the atomic bomb have really done to us is remind us forcibly of the sort of world we are living in, and which, during the prosperous period before 1914, not too many people can remember that anymore, we were beginning to forget. And this reminder is, so far as it goes, a good thing. We've been waked from a pretty dream, and now we can begin to talk about realities. We see at once, when we have been waked, that the important question is not whether an atomic bomb is going to obliterate civilization. The important question is whether nature, the thing studied by the sciences, is the only thing in existence. Because if you answer yes to the second question, then the first question only amounts to asking whether the inevitable frustration of all human activities may be hurried on by our own action instead of coming at its natural time. Are we speeding up the death of our world? I personally believe so. You might have your doubts, but it's just a matter of time. It comes to all of us. That is, of course, a question which concerns us very much. Even on a ship which will certainly sink sooner or later, the news that the boiler might blow up now would not be heard with indifference by anyone. So let's give the climate scientists a little bit of sympathy in their panic. But let's not lose sight of the question, what was her world? You see, there are a whole variety of other beliefs besides climate change and science and all of those things that have been governing her. We, however we want to define we, the species, the family, the country, we imagine we can secure our future through science, politics, money, power, propaganda, media. And if we, well, she's got ideas in her head. If we pass a Green New Deal or banish all car and air travel, or then suddenly we can perhaps turn the tide and turn the world back. And there are political opponents who say exactly the opposite thing. If we banish all the greenies, then we can all live in liberty and do as we want, and this will never end. None of that seems quite right to me. There are beliefs beneath the beliefs. And whatever side you take on climate change or any of these other issues, these beliefs beneath the beliefs are probably the ones that are governing your emotional world. Now that this story won't pay out per my expectation or her expectation, what then? Depression, suicide, anger, escapism, hedonism, tyranny? Save the world at all cost, is what we say again and again. And usually when we do so, we have other worlds collapse in on each other. Our false smaller worlds yield the same experience. People take such measures after a romantic breakup or a lost job or a cancer diagnosis or losing a soccer match. The world comes to an end, we say. Well, what is that world? And what were the assumptions and beliefs and expectations that we built that world upon? C.S. Lewis ends his essay by asking the question about nature. What, not what is, I'll correct that. What if nature is our sister, not our mother, alienated not by her will, but by ours? What then is nature? And how do we come to be imprisoned in a system so alien to us? Oddly enough, the question becomes much less sinister the moment we realize that nature is not all. Mistaken for our mother, she is terrifying and even abominable. But if she is only our sister, if she and we have a common creator, if she is our sparring partner, then the situation is quite tolerable. Perhaps we are not here as prisoners, but as colonists. Only consider what we have done already to the dog, the horse, or the daffodil. She is indeed a rough playfellow, and perhaps you might look at climate change's destruction of civilization as nature getting back at us. The plague has done it before. Tsunamis do it regularly. Earthquakes happen all the time. Nature is a rough plaything. We've tended to forget that. There are elements of evil in her. To explain that would carry us far back. I would have to speak of powers and principalities and all that would send the modern reader that would seem to a modern reader most mythological. This is not the place, nor do these questions come first. It is enough to say here that nature, like us, but in a different way, is much alienated from her creator, though in her, as in us, gleams of the old beauty remain. But they are not there to be worshipped, but to be enjoyed. She has nothing to teach us, but our busyness to live by our own law, not hers, to follow in private or in public life, the law of love, the temperance, even when they seem suicidal, and not the law of competition and grab, even when they seem to be necessary for our survival. Now, the big story that Zechariah whispers to us and gives us in this confusing dream of the ups and downs and the wild ride of the king coming to his city on a donkey, and the city shepherds rejecting him, and the sheep following. This is the king that comes and nature knows. The miracle of Palm Sunday, as I said on Palm Sunday, and I'll remind you again today, is that Jesus rides an unbroken beast. What's the miracle of that? Nature submits to him much better than my dog submits to me. Now, what shall we do with all this? Can we believe it? What power do we really have? Do we have the power to blow up the world? It seems so. Do we have the power to cook it? Quite possibly. What we don't seem to have is the power to stop ourselves. I'll put that in. You see, with most of these crises, the conflict is with other people. Can we get them to do what we think they should do? Isn't this the perpetual problem? Isn't this the constant temptation to tyranny? Isn't this what drives us to despair? Well, we certainly wouldn't nuke the Russians, but what if they nuke us? Well, maybe we can limit our greenhouse emissions, but will China and India limit theirs? What responsibility do we have? To love our neighbor as ourselves? How are we doing with that? To care for the garden we've been given? How are we doing with that? Before you can steward the world, you must steward yourself. How are we doing with that? What story do you live in? Where is your hope found? Do you believe in a king, the creator of us and nature, who asks that we bow to him, who asks that we believe in him? Will you welcome the king? Even in that city that welcomed him, on Sunday it was Hosanna, Son of David, and on Friday it was crucified. Will you welcome him?